The handprint on Willow Turner's cheek was still burning red when the stranger's pale fingers closed around her husband's wrist with impossible speed, stopping the second blow before it could land. Willow had been reaching for the car keys, ready to leave. Finally ready to leave after 3 years of walking on eggshells and making excuses for bruises she couldn't hide. Marcus had come home drunk again, shouting about dinner not being ready, about her being worthless, about everything and nothing all at once. She'd grabbed her purse, told him she was done, and that's when his hand had risen. The first slap had sent her stumbling backward into the kitchen counter. The second never connected. The man who caught Marcus's wrist stood impossibly tall, his presence filling their small apartment kitchen like darkness filling a room when a candle goes out. His hair fell in silver-white waves past his shoulders, and his skin held the luminescent quality of moonlight on snow. His eyes burned like molten amber, fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made the air feel heavy and electric. "You will never touch her again," the stranger said, his voice carrying an accent Willow couldn't place, something old European and refined, each word precisely enunciated. Marcus tried to jerk his arm free, his face flushing an ugly purple. "Who the hell are you? This is my house, my wife, and you need to get out before I call the cops." The stranger's grip tightened, and Marcus's bravado crumbled into a whimper of pain. Willow watched, frozen against the counter, as the tall man's lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too perfect, too deliberately arranged. Fangs. Actual fangs. "Your house," the stranger repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. "Your wife. You speak of possession as though it grants you dominion over a life that is not yours to command." He twisted Marcus's wrist with surgical precision, forcing the man to his knees. "Let me show you what true dominion looks like." Before Willow could process what was happening, the stranger pulled Marcus's wrist to his mouth and bit down. Not the savage attack she'd seen in movies, but something deliberate and purposeful. Marcus screamed, and when the stranger released him, there was a mark on his inner wrist that looked like a brand, dark and raised and somehow writhing beneath the skin. "This mark will follow you for the remainder of your mortal days," the stranger said, releasing Marcus, who scrambled backward across the linoleum floor. "Every vampire in this city, in this country, in this world will know what you are when they see it. They will know you raised your hand to strike someone weaker than yourself. They will know you are a coward." He straightened, wiping the corner of his mouth with elegant fingers. "And in our circles, cowards are treated with the contempt they deserve." Marcus was still screaming, clutching his wrist, when he finally stumbled to his feet and ran from the apartment. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the walls. Willow's legs felt like water. She gripped the counter behind her, trying to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. The stranger turned to her then, and his expression softened in a way that seemed almost painful, as though gentleness was a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "Forgive my intrusion," he said, inclining his head slightly. "I was passing by when I heard the commotion. I should have knocked, should have announced myself, but time was rather pressing." "You're a vampire," Willow managed to say, her voice coming out smaller than she'd intended. "I am." He took a careful step backward, giving her space. "My name is Dimitri Valdis. I mean you no harm. You just bit my husband." "Your abuser," Dimitri corrected, something sharp flashing through his eyes. "There is a distinction worth maintaining." Willow's hand moved unconsciously to her cheek, which still stung from Marcus's blow. "What did you do to him, that mark?" "Nothing he did not earn." Dimitri's gaze tracked to where Marcus had fled, his jaw tightening. "The mark will identify him to my kind. He will find no protection, no sanctuary, no aid from any vampire who sees it. It is not a death sentence, but it is a warning. Touch her again, and it will become one." The apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of questions Willow didn't know how to ask. She'd spent 3 years trying to survive, trying to keep Marcus calm, trying to convince herself that the good days outweighed the bad. Now a vampire had walked into her kitchen and marked her husband like livestock, and she couldn't decide if she should be terrified or grateful. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. Dimitri was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those burning amber eyes. "Because I have lived for 3 centuries, and in all that time, I have never understood why humans allow such cruelty to flourish in their own homes. Because you were trying to leave and he was going to stop you. Because," he paused, seeming to search for words, "because no one should have to endure what you were enduring." Willow felt something crack open inside her chest, some dam she'd built from denial and fear and desperate hope that things would get better. Tears started without her permission, hot and fast and overwhelming. She tried to wipe them away, hating that this stranger was seeing her fall apart, but they kept coming. "I'm sorry," she gasped out. "I'm sorry, I don't usually." Dimitri moved with that same impossible speed, producing a handkerchief from somewhere in his dark coat and offering it to her. He didn't come closer, didn't try to touch her, just held it out and waited until she took it. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said quietly. She pressed the fabric to her face, breathing in the scent of cedar and something older, something like libraries and winter nights. When she finally looked up again, Dimitri was standing by the window, giving her privacy in her own breakdown. "He'll come back," Willow said, reality settling over her like cold water. "Marcus doesn't just give up, he'll wait until you're gone, and then he'll come back angrier than before. Then you should not be here when he does." Dimitri turned from the window, his expression serious. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Willow thought of her sister in another state, her parents who'd never approved of Marcus in the first place, the friend who'd stopped calling after Marcus convinced her they didn't need anyone else. She'd burned so many bridges trying to keep her marriage together. "Not really," she admitted. "I have some money saved. I can get a hotel room for a few nights while I figure things out. That will not be sufficient." Dimitri's tone left no room for argument. "He knows where you work, where your family lives, where you go when you need space. The mark I gave him will deter vampires, but it will not stop a determined human with violence in his heart. What are you suggesting?" He was quiet again, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I have resources, properties where you would be safe. I could arrange for I don't know you." Willow interrupted, fear and exhaustion making her sharp. "You just showed up and bit my husband, and now you want me to go home with you? How is that any better?" Dimitri's expression didn't change, but something flickered through his eyes that might have been hurt. "You are correct. You have no reason to trust me. I am a stranger and I am not even human. For all you know, I intervened only to claim you for myself. Did you?" "No." The word came out flat and absolute. "I intervened because it was the right thing to do. Whether you believe that is entirely your choice." Willow wanted to believe him. Everything about Dimitri, from his careful distance to his formal manner of speaking, suggested someone bound by rules she didn't understand, but she'd trusted Marcus once, too. She'd believed him when he said he'd never hurt her again. "I'll get a hotel," she said finally. "Thank you for helping me, but I need to do this on my own." Dimitri nodded slowly, reaching into his coat and withdrawing a small black card. "Take this, my contact information. If you need assistance, any assistance at all, you may reach me at any hour." She took the card, feeling the expensive weight of it. Embossed in silver were a phone number and an address in the historic district downtown. No name, just a symbol she didn't recognize, something that looked like a crown wrapped in thorns. "I should go," Dimitri said, moving toward the door Marcus had fled through. "Pack what you need. Do not stay here longer than necessary." "Wait." Willow wasn't sure why she stopped him, but something in her chest twisted at the thought of him leaving. "The mark you gave Marcus, will it really protect me? From my kind, yes. From him?" Dimitri's jaw tightened again. "It will make him think twice. It will make him afraid. But humans are unpredictable creatures, and fear makes them dangerous." He paused at the threshold, looking back at her. "Which is why you should not face this alone." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut softly behind him, and Willow was left standing in her kitchen with a vampire's handkerchief pressed to her burning cheek. She didn't go to a hotel. Instead, she packed 3 suitcases with everything she couldn't bear to lose, loaded them into her car, and drove to her sister's house 4 states away. She called from the road, explained only that she'd finally left Marcus, and listened to her sister cry with relief. She didn't mention the vampire or the mark or the way her hands had only stopped shaking once she'd crossed state lines. For 2 weeks, Willow tried to build a new life. She stayed with her sister, applied for jobs in a city where Marcus didn't know anyone, and started seeing a therapist who specialized in domestic violence survivors. She threw herself into recovery with the same desperate energy she'd once used to keep her marriage together. But at night, she dreamed of amber eyes and silver hair, and a voice that had promised she didn't have to face this alone. She kept Dimitri's card in her wallet, taking it out sometimes just to look at it, wondering what kind of vampire gave out business cards and stopped to help strangers. Wondering if he'd meant what he said, or if she'd just been a passing curiosity, something to amuse him for an evening before he returned to whatever vampires did with their immortal lives. The nightmares started on the 16th day. Marcus in her bedroom, Marcus finding her sister's house, Marcus with his hands around her throat. She'd wake up gasping, checking and rechecking the locks, knowing logically that he couldn't have followed her but feeling his presence like a weight on her chest. On the 19th day, her sister came home from work pale and shaking, holding her phone like it might bite her. "Marcus called my work line," she said. "He wants to know where you are. He said you took something that belonged to him, and he wants it back." Willow felt her carefully constructed new life crack down the middle. What did you tell him? Nothing. I hung up, but Willow, he sounded so calm. That's what scared me. He wasn't yelling or making threats, he just sounded very, very sure that he was going to find you. That night, Willow took out Dimitri's card and stared at it for an hour. Pride warred with fear, independence with the creeping certainty that Marcus wasn't going to let this go. Finally, at 2 in the morning, she dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. Willow. Her name in his mouth sounded like something precious, something worth protecting. Are you safe? I don't know, she admitted. I left the city, I'm with my sister. But Marcus is looking for me, and I don't know what to do. Where are you? No judgment in the question, just immediate focus. I can be there by dawn. She gave him the address, hating herself a little for dragging him into this, for not being strong enough to handle it alone. You don't have to come. I just needed to talk to someone who understood. I am already making arrangements, Dimitri said, and she could hear movement in the background, the rustle of fabric and the quiet efficiency of someone used to acting quickly. Stay inside. Do not answer the door for anyone. I will call you when I arrive, Dimitri. She stopped him before he could hang up. Thank you. There was a pause, long enough that she wondered if he'd already ended the call. Then his voice came through, softer than before. You do not need to thank me for caring whether you live or die, Willow. That should be the bare minimum of human decency. He hung up, and Willow sat in her sister's guest room, feeling something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the first fragile seed of it. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, there were people in the world who helped without expecting anything in return. Dimitri arrived 3 hours later, just as the sky was beginning to lighten with approaching dawn. Willow met him at the door, and the sight of him made her breath catch. He wore all black, his white hair pulled back in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of his face, and his eyes found hers with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd forgotten was possible. You came, she said stupidly. Did you think I would not? He stepped inside, glancing around the modest home with the assessing gaze of someone used to evaluating threats. I gave you my word. Willow's sister appeared in the hallway, stopped dead, and stared. Dimitri turned to her with that same slight bow he'd given Willow in her kitchen. You must be the sister, he said. I am Dimitri. I am here to ensure that Marcus does not become a problem. Her sister looked at Willow, eyebrows climbing toward her hairline. Is he? Is he like a vampire? Yes, Dimitri confirmed calmly. I apologize for the early hour. I needed to arrive before sunrise made travel more complicated. You're very pale, her sister said faintly. I am aware. Despite everything, Willow felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. The absurdity of it all, standing in her sister's entryway at 5 in the morning, introducing a 300-year-old vampire like he was a boyfriend she'd brought home for Thanksgiving. Dimitri's attention shifted back to her, something like approval flickering through his expression. You are safe here for now. But if Marcus has found your sister's workplace, he will find this address. We need to discuss your options. They sat at the kitchen table while dawn broke outside, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that made Dimitri shift uncomfortably, avoiding the direct light from the windows. Willow's sister made coffee with shaking hands and then excused herself, claiming she needed to get ready for work, but really just wanting to give them space. Tell me what has happened since you left, Dimitri said. Willow explained the past 2 weeks. The job applications, the therapy, the feeling of finally breathing again. Then the call to her sister's work, the nightmares, the certainty that Marcus was hunting her. Dimitri listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm that suggested he was thinking through several options at once. He is escalating, Dimitri said finally. The mark I gave him should have been enough to make him reconsider. But some humans are too proud or too foolish to recognize when they are outmatched. He is not going to stop, so what do I do? Willow asked, hating the helplessness in her own voice. Hide forever, get a restraining order, he'll ignore. I just want to move on with my life. There is another option. Dimitri met her eyes, his expression serious. Come with me. To my home, to my territory. It is not just protection I am offering, but sanctuary. Marcus will not be able to reach you there. I can't just move in with you. I don't even know you. Then get to know me. He said it simply, as though it were the most obvious solution in the world. I have lived a very long time, Willow. I have seen empires rise and fall, have watched humans make the same mistakes generation after generation. But I have also seen survivors, people who refuse to let their past define their future. You are one of those people. You left him. You rebuilt. You deserve the chance to continue without constantly looking over your shoulder. Why do you care? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. Dimitri's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he might not answer. Then he leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the window, where morning light painted the world in colors he couldn't safely touch. 60 years ago, I failed to help someone who needed it, he said quietly. A young woman in circumstances not unlike yours. I saw the bruises, heard the arguments through apartment walls, and I told myself it was not my concern, that human affairs were not for me to meddle in. 3 days later, she was dead, and her husband claimed it was an accident. I have carried that failure ever since. His eyes found hers again, burning with intensity. I cannot change the past, but I can act in the present. I can make sure that history does not repeat itself. Willow felt something crack open wider in her chest, that seed of possibility unfurling into something more substantial. I'm not your redemption. No, Dimitri agreed. You are simply someone who deserves better than the hand life has dealt you. If helping you achieves redemption in the process, then I will be grateful. But that is not why I am here. She studied him, this impossible creature who'd walked into her life, with fangs and old-world courtesies and a determination to keep her safe. Everything about him should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something like trust. If I come with you, she said slowly, I need ground rules. I need my own space, my own room, my own life. I'm not trading one cage for another. I would expect nothing less. Dimitri's expression softened. You would have an entire wing of the estate to yourself. Come and go as you please. Find work, pursue your interests. Live your life. I ask only that you allow me to ensure your safety while you do. And if Marcus finds me, then he will discover exactly what it means to have a vampire's protection. The words carried an undercurrent of violence that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel safer than she had in years. Willow looked down at her coffee, at the dregs swirling in the bottom of the cup like tea leaves that might tell her future. She thought about staying here, about finding an apartment and a job, and always wondering when Marcus would appear. She thought about Dimitri's offer, about a vampire's estate, and the strange safety of being claimed by something more dangerous than her ex-husband's anger. Okay, she said finally, I'll come with you. But I'm serious about the ground rules. I need independence. You will have it. Dimitri stood, offering her his hand. She took it, feeling the cool press of his palm against hers, the strength carefully leashed. Pack what you need. We will leave tonight, after sunset. I will make arrangements for transportation. Her sister took the news better than expected, perhaps because the alternative was watching Willow look over her shoulder for the rest of her life. She hugged Willow tight at the door that evening, made Dimitri promise to take care of her, and slipped a can of mace into Willow's jacket pocket with a meaningful look. Just in case, she whispered. Vampire or not, you don't really know him. Willow appreciated the concern, even as she suspected mace would do very little against something that could move faster than she could blink. The car Dimitri had arranged was sleek and black, and far too expensive for Willow to feel comfortable sitting in. She climbed into the passenger seat while Dimitri loaded her suitcases into the trunk with easy strength. And then they were driving through the night toward a future she couldn't quite imagine. Tell me about where we're going, she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. The estate has been in my possession for nearly a century, Dimitri said, eyes on the road. It sits on 20 acres just outside the city, far enough from human neighborhoods to provide privacy. The main house is old, renovated several times but maintaining its original architecture. There is a garden, a library, several guest cottages. My second-in-command, Lucian, lives on the grounds with his partner. You will be safe there. Do you have a lot of staff, other vampires? A few, Lucian, as I mentioned. Serafina, who manages household affairs. A handful of others who come and go. We are not a large coven, but we are loyal to each other. He glanced at her briefly. They will understand the situation. No one will bother you unless you wish for company. And the vampire world, how does that work? Is there a government or laws or? Dimitri's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile but close. There are councils, yes, territories and rulers and politics that make human governments look simple by comparison. I hold a seat on the North American Council, which is why the mark I gave Marcus carries weight. Other vampires will respect it because they respect the authority behind it. You're important then, in the vampire world. I suppose that is one way to phrase it. He was quiet for a moment. I have lived long enough to accumulate power and influence. Whether that makes me important or simply old is a matter of perspective. Willow found herself smiling despite everything. There was something almost humble in the way Dimitri spoke about himself, as though 3 centuries of existence had taught him not to take his own significance too seriously. They drove through the night, talking in fits and starts, long, comfortable silences punctuated by questions and answers. Willow learned that Dimitri had been turned during the French Revolution, that he'd spent decades wandering Europe before settling in America, that he'd seen the world change in ways that both amazed and horrified him. He asked about her life in return, and she found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone. Her dreams of being a writer, abandoned when Marcus said it was a waste of time. Her love of old movies and gardens and the ocean. The person she'd been before survival became her only goal. By the time they reached the estate, dawn was approaching again, and Willow was exhausted. The house rose out of the darkness like something from a Gothic novel, all stone walls and tall windows and ivy, climbing toward a roof she couldn't quite see. It should have been intimidating. Instead, it felt like sanctuary. Dimitri led her inside, through halls lined with art that probably belonged in museums, past rooms filled with furniture that looked older than America itself. Her wing was on the second floor, a suite of rooms that included a bedroom, a sitting area, and a bathroom that could have fit her entire apartment back in the city. "Rest," Dimitri said, standing at the threshold as though afraid to come too far inside her space. "We will talk more this evening, after you have slept. If you need anything, there is a phone by the bed. Dial 0 and someone will answer." Dimitri. She stopped him before he could leave. "Thank you for all of this. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know what else to say." He looked at her with those burning amber eyes, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. "You do not need to say anything, Willow. Just rest. Just be safe." Then he was gone, and she was alone in a vampire's estate, more protected than she'd ever been in her life. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment. Willow slept late, explored the grounds, and slowly began to believe that maybe this was real, that maybe she really was safe. Dimitri appeared each evening after sunset, checking on her with a careful courtesy that never felt invasive. They ate dinner together, or rather, Willow ate while Dimitri kept her company, and they talked about everything and nothing. She met Lucien, who was shorter than Dimitri, with dark hair and sharp eyes and a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. She met Serafina, elegant and remote, with silver hair that fell to her waist, and a smile that suggested she knew secrets worth keeping. They treated her with a respect that bordered on deference, and when she asked Lucien about it, he just shrugged. "Dimitri cares about you," he said simply. "That makes you important to us." On the 10th day, Willow's phone rang. "Marcus." She stared at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs, and then she answered. "Where are you?" he demanded. No pretense of civility. "I've been looking everywhere. Your sister won't talk to me, your friends won't talk to me, and I'm getting really tired of being treated like the bad guy." "You hit me," Willow said, surprised by how steady her voice came out. "Multiple times. You are the bad guy. That was a mistake. I told you I was sorry. We can work through this if you just come home." "I'm not coming home. We're done, Marcus. I want a divorce." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that she thought he might have hung up. Then his voice came back, low and dangerous. "You think you can just leave? You think you can embarrass me like this and there won't be consequences? The only consequence is that I finally get to live my life without being afraid." Her hand was shaking, but she kept talking. "Don't call me again. Don't look for me. Just sign the divorce papers when they arrive and move on." "I will find you," Marcus said. "That thing that bit me, that mark, I don't care. I will find you and I will bring you home. Then you will regret it." Dimitri's voice came from the doorway, and Willow realized he'd been listening. He moved into the room with that predatory grace, plucking the phone from her hand and raising it to his ear. "Hello, Marcus. This is Dimitri Valdis. We met once before. I gave you a warning. Consider this your second and final one. If you contact Willow again, if you attempt to find her, if you so much as think about her without immediately redirecting your thoughts elsewhere, I will consider it a violation of the terms I set, and the consequences will be severe." She couldn't hear what Marcus said in response, but Dimitri's expression went cold and hard as marble. "You are welcome to try. I have faced down armies, Marcus. I have survived revolutions and wars and betrayals that would break your small human mind. What makes you think you pose even the slightest threat to me or anyone under my protection?" He paused, listening. "Yes, that is precisely what I am saying. She is under my protection now, which means she is untouchable. Pursue this, and you pursue your own death." He ended the call, handed the phone back to Willow, and she realized she was shaking again. Not from fear this time, but from the sheer relief of having someone stand between her and the thing she'd been running from. "I apologize for intruding," Dimitri said, his tone gentling. "But I could not stand by and let him threaten you. I'm glad you did." Willow set the phone down, wrapping her arms around herself. God, even hearing his voice, Dimitri moved closer, still careful, still maintaining distance. "He cannot reach you here. I meant what I said to him. You are under my protection and I do not make that declaration lightly. Why? The question burst out of her. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. I know enough. His eyes held hers and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not just determination or duty, but something deeper, something that looked almost like longing. I know you are brave and kind and stronger than you realize. I know you deserve a life without fear. And I know that when I am near you, I feel something I have not felt in decades. What do you feel? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hope, Dimitri said simply. That perhaps immortality is not simply an endless march through time, but an opportunity to connect with something that makes existence worthwhile. The air between them felt charged, electric with possibility. Willow took a step closer, drawn by something she couldn't name, and Dimitri went very still, as though afraid any movement might shatter the moment. I think I'm falling for you, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I know it's too soon and completely insane, but I can't stop thinking about you, about how safe I feel when you're near, about how you look at me like I matter. You do matter. Dimitri's hand rose, hesitated, and then gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over the place where Marcus's blow had landed weeks ago. You matter more than you could possibly know. Then he was kissing her, or she was kissing him, or they were meeting somewhere in the middle. His lips were cool against hers, his touch careful as though she might break, and Willow felt something inside her chest unfurl completely. That seed of possibility blooming into something real and vital and necessary. When they pulled apart, Dimitri rested his forehead against hers, his breath unnecessary but given anyway, a gesture of shared space. This complicates things, he murmured. Good, Willow said, smiling. I'm tired of simple. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, and Willow thought that maybe this was what healing felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something strong enough to carry the weight of it. The call from Marcus had been a violation, but it had also been a catalyst. After that night, something shifted between Willow and Dimitri. The careful distance he'd maintained dissolved into something warmer, more immediate. They spent every evening together, talking and laughing and slowly learning the shape of each other. He showed her the library, thousands of books collected over centuries, and she spent hours curled in an armchair reading, while he worked through correspondence that seemed to come from all over the world. She started writing again, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Dimitri read her work with the careful attention of someone who understood that creativity was both gift and wound, and his feedback was always thoughtful, always encouraging. You have a gift for dialogue, he said one evening, setting down a story she'd written about a girl who ran away from home. The way you capture human emotion, the small moments between larger events, it is extraordinary. You're biased, Willow said, but she was smiling. I am 300 years old. I have read more books than most humans will encounter in a lifetime. I assure you I am an excellent judge of quality. He reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand. You should pursue this properly. Submit your work. Find an agent. Let the world see what you can do. Maybe, she said, squeezing his fingers. I'm still figuring out who I am without Marcus's voice in my head telling me I'm not good enough. You are more than good enough. Dimitri brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You are exceptional. The first time Willow ventured into the city after dark, Dimitri insisted on accompanying her. They went to a bookstore, a cafe, a movie theater where they watched a romantic comedy that made Dimitri shake his head at the historical inaccuracies but smile at Willow's laughter. Walking through the streets with him, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Freedom, joy, the simple pleasure of existing in the world without fear. They were leaving the theater when she saw him. Marcus, standing across the street, staring at her with an expression that made her blood run cold. He'd found her. Dimitri noticed the change in her immediately, following her gaze and going very still. Stay close to me, he said quietly. Marcus crossed the street and Willow could see the mark on his wrist even from a distance, dark and raised and somehow worse than she remembered. His face was haggard, his clothes rumpled, and there was something wild in his eyes that suggested he'd crossed a line she didn't want to contemplate. Willow, he said, ignoring Dimitri completely. We need to talk. There is nothing to discuss, Dimitri said, stepping between them with fluid grace. I warned you. Marcus, I told you what would happen if you pursued this. I don't care about your warnings. Marcus's voice was shaking, rage or fear or some combination of both. She's my wife. She belongs with me. I belong to myself, Willow said, finding her voice. I'm filing for divorce, Marcus. It's over. It's not over until I say it's over. Marcus lunged forward, reaching for her, and everything happened very fast. Dimitri moved between them with inhuman speed, catching Marcus's wrist again, the same wrist he'd marked. Marcus screamed, a sound of pure agony, and Willow saw the mark flare with dark light, spreading up his arm like infection. "I told you," Dimitri said, his voice colder than Willow had ever heard it. "I told you what would happen. You have violated the terms of my warning. You have threatened someone under my protection. The mark is now your death sentence." "Stop it!" Willow grabbed Dimitri's arm, feeling the coiled tension in his muscles. "Please don't kill him. He's not worth it." Dimitri looked at her, something like anguish crossing his face. "He will not stop, Willow. As long as he lives, he will hunt you. Is that what you want? A lifetime of looking over your shoulder? I don't want his death on my conscience." She held Dimitri's gaze, willing him to understand. "Please, there has to be another way." For a long moment she thought he might refuse. Then he released Marcus, who crumpled to the ground clutching his arm, and the dark light faded from the mark. "You have one chance," Dimitri told Marcus, his voice carrying an authority that made people on the street stop and stare. "Leave this city, leave this state. Start a new life somewhere far from here and never speak her name again. Do that and the mark will become dormant. It will not kill you, but it will serve as a permanent reminder of what you almost lost. Refuse and I will not stay my hand a second time. Do you understand?" Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face, and scrambled away into the darkness. Willow sagged against Dimitri, adrenaline making her shake. "Thank you for stopping. I would do anything you asked of me," Dimitri said quietly, holding her up. "Even when I disagree with the wisdom of it." They went home after that, and Willow spent the rest of the night curled against Dimitri on the sofa, letting him hold her while she processed everything that had happened. His presence was solid and cool and steady, an anchor in a world that felt like it kept shifting beneath her feet. "Do you think he'll actually leave?" she asked finally. "I think he is a coward, and cowards tend to choose survival over pride." Dimitri's fingers moved through her hair in a soothing rhythm. "But we will take precautions. I will have Lucian and Serafina keep watch. If Marcus violates my command, he will not live to regret it. I don't want you to become a killer because of me. I have been a killer for 3 centuries, Willow. It is part of what I am." He tilted her face up to his expression serious. "But I understand your concern. I will not act unless absolutely necessary. Will that suffice?" She nodded, and he kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. Over the following weeks there was no sign of Marcus. Lucian's contacts confirmed he'd left the state, taken a job in another city, and appeared to be starting over. The divorce papers were signed and returned without protest. Slowly, carefully, Willow began to believe that maybe it really was over, that maybe she could move forward without constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. She fell deeper in love with Dimitri during those weeks, learning the contours of his heart beneath the formal courtesy and ancient power. She learned that he loved classical music but secretly enjoyed pop songs from the 1980s, that he was a terrible cook but an excellent gardener, that he'd been lonely for longer than she could comprehend, going through the motions of existence without really living. "You brought color back to my world," he told her one evening, standing in the garden while she sketched the roses he'd cultivated. "I did not realize how gray everything had become until you arrived." "You saved my life," she countered. "Literally and figuratively. I was so lost, Dimitri, so convinced that what Marcus did to me was somehow my fault, that I deserved it. You showed me that wasn't true. You would have found your way without me." He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You are stronger than you give yourself credit for. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone." They kissed then, slow and deep and full of promise, and Willow thought about forever, about what it might mean to love someone who would never age, never change, never leave her through anything but her own mortality. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. 3 months after moving into the estate, Willow received a message from an agent interested in her writing. She'd submitted some stories on Dimitri's encouragement, not really expecting anything to come of it, and now someone wanted to represent her, wanted to help her publish a collection. She ran through the house looking for Dimitri, finding him in the library with Lucian and Serafina. The 3 of them bent over some council matter that probably affected the fate of vampires across the continent. She didn't care. She burst in waving her phone, and Dimitri looked up with an expression of alarm that melted into joy when he saw her smile. "Someone wants to represent me," she said, breathless. "An actual agent. They think they can sell my collection." Dimitri stood, crossed to her in 3 strides, and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. Lucian and Serafina applauded, and Willow felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride, accomplishment, the bone-deep satisfaction of creating something worthwhile. I am so proud of you, Dimitri murmured against her hair. You are extraordinary, Willow Turner. Never doubt that. I love you, she said, the words easy and natural and true. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I don't care. I love you. I love you as well. Dimitri set her down, cupping her face between his cool palms. I have loved you since that first night when you cried in your kitchen and I realized I would do anything to keep you safe. You have given my existence meaning again, Willow. You have given me purpose beyond simply surviving. They kissed while Lucian and Serafina made exaggerated gagging noises in the background, and Willow laughed against Dimitri's mouth, feeling lighter than she had in years. The book was published 8 months later, a collection of stories about survival and strength and finding yourself in the aftermath of trauma. It did well enough that Willow started getting offers for more work, for speaking engagements, for all the things she'd once dreamed about before Marcus convinced her she wasn't good enough. Dimitri came to her first reading, sitting in the back of the bookstore with Lucian and Serafina, and the pride in his eyes when she finished was worth more than any review or sales number. They settled into a life that worked, strange as it might seem from the outside. Willow wrote and pursued her career, traveling for events but always coming home to the estate, to Dimitri. He managed his council responsibilities, navigating vampire politics with the same careful diplomacy he'd shown her from the beginning. They existed in 2 worlds, human and vampire, and somehow made it work. A year after moving in, Willow brought up the question that had been circling in her mind for months. They were in the garden, Dimitri tending his roses while Willow sat nearby with her laptop, and she closed it carefully before speaking. What happens when I get old? Dimitri's hands stilled on the rosebush he'd been pruning. What do you mean? I mean you're immortal and I'm not. Someday I'm going to be 60, 70, 80 and you're still going to look exactly like this. She gestured at him, at his ageless beauty. What happens then? He set down his pruning shears and came to sit beside her, taking her hands. Then I will love you at 60, 70, 80 just as I love you now. Age is irrelevant to me, Willow. I have seen empires crumble and civilizations rise. What matters is not how long we have, but how we spend the time we are given. And if I wanted to be turned, to become like you? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Dimitri was quiet for a long time, his expression conflicted. I would turn you in an instant if you asked, he said finally. But I would also beg you to consider carefully. Immortality is not the gift it appears to be. It is isolation and loss and watching everyone you care about die while you continue. I would not wish that burden on you lightly. But you wouldn't be watching me die. That's the point. No. But you would watch your sister, your parents, everyone you know from your human life fade away. You would lose your ability to exist in sunlight, to taste human food, to walk through the world without constantly hiding what you are. He squeezed her hands gently. These are not small sacrifices, Willow. She thought about it, really thought about it. About Marcus and the life she'd escaped, about the person she'd become in the aftermath, about Dimitri and the future they could have together. I don't want to decide right now, she said finally. But I want the option. When I'm ready, if I'm ready, I want to know that you would do it, that you wouldn't let me go just because I'm human. I will never let you go, Dimitri said, pulling her into his arms. Whether you remain human or choose to become vampire, you are mine, Willow Turner. For as long as you will have me. Forever sounds pretty good, she murmured against his chest. Then forever it is. 2 years became 3, then 4. Willow's writing career flourished. She published another collection, then a novel, and critics compared her to literary masters, while readers connected with the raw honesty of her work. She traveled for book tours, for writers' conferences, for all the opportunities she'd once thought were impossible, and Dimitri supported her every step of the way. He joined her when he could, navigating human spaces with the same grace he showed in vampire courts, and the literary world slowly became accustomed to the mysterious, elegant partner who accompanied Willow Turner to events. Some speculated about his origins, about the accent no one could place and the old-fashioned courtesy that seemed out of time, but no one guessed the truth. Marcus became a distant memory, a scar that had healed into something she could acknowledge without pain. She heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd remarried, had a child, seemed to have built a new life in a different state. She hoped he'd learned something from their time together. Hoped he treated his new family better than he'd treated her. On their 4th anniversary of the night, Dimitri had walked into her kitchen and changed everything. They stood in the garden, where so many of their important conversations had happened. The roses were in full bloom, the air sweet with their perfume, and Dimitri knelt before her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I am not a human man, he said, and I cannot offer you a human life. But I can offer you my heart, my protection, my devotion for as long as you will accept it. Willow Turner, will you marry me? The ring he produced was antique, a ruby surrounded by diamonds that caught the moonlight and threw red sparks across the garden. It was beautiful and old and perfect. Yes, Willow said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her while roses bloomed around them and the moon watched from above, and Willow thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something strong enough to make all the pain worthwhile. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony on the estate grounds. Willow's sister stood as maid of honor, crying happy tears and threatening Dimitri with bodily harm if he ever hurt her sister. Lucian and Serafina served as witnesses, along with a small gathering of vampires who'd traveled from across the continent to honor their council members' union. It was strange and beautiful and perfect, a blending of human tradition and vampire custom, and when Dimitri kissed his bride beneath an arch of roses, Willow felt like she'd finally come home. The question of turning came up again on their wedding night. They lay together in Dimitri's rooms, her rooms now too, and Willow traced patterns across his chest while moonlight painted them both in silver. I want you to turn me, she said quietly. Not now, not immediately, but someday. I want forever with you, Dimitri. Real forever, not just the human kind. He caught her hand, stilling her movements. You are certain? You understand what you would be giving up? I understand that I would be gaining more than I would lose. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. I've already lived a human life, Dimitri. I've experienced the good and the bad, the joy and the pain. Now I want to experience something else. I want to see the world through your eyes. I want centuries instead of decades. I want to grow and change and exist alongside you for as long as the universe allows. When? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. 5 years. Give me 5 more years to finish the projects I've started, to say proper goodbyes to the people I need to say goodbye to prepare for what comes next. Then turn me, and we'll face eternity together. Dimitri pulled her down into a kiss that tasted like promises and forever, and the sweet dark future they would share. 5 years, he agreed, and then you become mine in every way possible. I'm already yours, Willow whispered against his mouth. I have been since that first night. Those 5 years passed like a dream. Willow accomplished everything she'd set out to do and more. She published 2 more novels, won awards she'd once thought were out of reach, and made peace with her past in all the ways that mattered. Her relationship with her sister deepened, built on honesty and trust and the knowledge that soon everything would change. Her parents, who'd never approved of Marcus and loved Dimitri with the fierce gratitude of people who'd seen their daughter saved, supported her decision even though they didn't fully understand it. You're happy, her mother said one afternoon over tea. Really, truly happy. That's all we ever wanted for you. I am, Willow confirmed. Happier than I knew was possible. As the 5-year mark approached, Willow felt no fear, only anticipation. She'd lived fully and completely, had experienced everything she wanted from her human life, and now she was ready for the next chapter. The turning happened on a night very much like the one when they'd first met, with a full moon hanging heavy in the sky and roses blooming in the garden below. Dimitri had explained the process carefully, making sure she understood that it would hurt, that there would be a period of adjustment, that she would wake up different in fundamental ways. I'm ready, she told him, lying in their bed with candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. I've never been more ready for anything. Dimitri kissed her then, tender and reverent, and then his mouth moved to her throat. The bite was sharp and bright and exactly what she'd expected, and as her human life drained away, she felt no regret, only joy. Only gratitude for the chance to continue the story they'd started together. She woke 3 days later to a world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds more distinct, every sensation heightened to almost unbearable intensity. Dimitri was there, holding her through the transition, and when she finally opened her eyes and saw him clearly for the first time with vampire sight, she gasped. He was beautiful. He'd always been beautiful, but now she could see the truth of him, the power coiled beneath the surface, the centuries written in the planes of his face. Welcome back, he said, smiling. How do you feel? Alive, Willow said, laughing at the irony. More alive than I've ever felt. The adjustment period was difficult but manageable. Dimitri guided her through every step, teaching her to control her strength, to hunt ethically, to navigate the vampire world that was now her world too. Lucian and Serafina welcomed her formally into their coven, and Willow found herself part of a family she'd never expected to have. She continued writing, her work taking on new depth now that she experienced the world through immortal eyes. Critics noted the change in her voice, the way her recent novels felt both more human and more otherworldly, and her readership grew. Her sister was the hardest goodbye, though it wasn't really goodbye so much as a shift in how they related to each other. They still talked every week, still maintained their relationship, but there was an awareness now of the divide between them. Human and vampire, mortal and immortal. It hurt, but it was bearable because Willow had chosen it with open eyes. 20 years after Dimitri had walked into her kitchen and caught her husband's raised hand mid-swing, Willow stood in that same garden where so much of her life had unfolded. She was still young in vampire terms, barely more than a fledgling, but she'd learned much. About herself, about her kind, about the strange and wonderful existence she'd chosen. Dimitri found her there, moving up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About that first night," she said, leaning back against him. "About how terrified I was, how broken I felt. I thought my life was ending, Dimitri. I thought I'd lost everything. But really, it was just beginning." "You were never broken," he murmured against her hair, now white as snow to match his own. "You were simply trapped in circumstances that did not allow you to shine. All I did was provide the space for you to become who you were always meant to be. You did more than that. You showed me what love was supposed to look like, what partnership meant. You gave me forever." They stood together in the moonlight, immortal and impossibly in love, and Willow thought about the girl she'd been. The one who'd stayed too long, who'd believed she deserved the pain, who'd thought happiness was something that happened to other people. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that salvation would come from the most unexpected place, that a vampire with amber eyes would walk into her life and change everything. But that girl was gone now, transformed into something stronger, something that would endure. And the vampire who'd saved her had become the center of an existence that stretched forward into eternity. Marcus's mark on Dimitri's territory had faded into legend, a cautionary tale told among vampires about the cost of raising your hand to someone weaker than yourself. Marcus himself had died years ago, old age and heart disease according to the obituary Willow had seen. She'd felt nothing when she read it. No satisfaction, no grief, just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter of her life had finally definitively closed. "I love you," she said, turning in Dimitri's arms to face him. "For saving me, for seeing me, for giving me the chance to become this." "I love you," he replied, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. "For allowing me to help, for bringing light back into my darkness, for choosing to spend eternity with a creature who thought he'd lost the capacity for joy." They kissed then, deep and sure and full of the confidence that came from centuries still ahead of them, from battles fought and won, from a love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. The story that had started with violence and fear had transformed into something beautiful, something that would endure long after the world they'd known had changed beyond recognition. Willow had been saved by a vampire king. Yes, but more than that, she'd saved herself. She'd chosen to leave, to rebuild, to love again despite every reason to close herself off from the possibility of pain. And in doing so, she'd found not just safety or protection, but true partnership, a love that saw her fully and chose her completely, a future that stretched forward into forever, full of possibility and promise and the kind of happiness she'd once thought existed only in stories. In the garden where roses bloomed eternal, under a moon that would watch over them for centuries to come, Willow and Dimitri stood together. Vampire and vampire, partner and partner. Two souls who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. The hand that had been raised in violence had been stopped, marked, and rendered powerless, and in its place had come a love that would echo through the ages, a testament to the truth that salvation sometimes came from the most unexpected places, wearing the most unexpected faces. Willow Turner had been broken and remade. She'd been human and become something more. She'd been trapped and freed herself with help from someone who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. And now, standing in the garden with eternity stretched before her and her husband's arms around her, she was simply, completely, perfectly happy. The story was over, but the life had just begun, and it would be extraordinary.